D&D combat's so boring! If I wanted to waste my time for 2 hours only to be disappointed because the other person's on their phone, I'd go ahead and whoa, family friendly! But it's weird, isn't it? D&D is a combat-oriented system, yet combat kinda sucks. Initiative is slow, AC being a binary hit-miss leads to turns feeling wasted, and 5e in particular was built around the concept of bounded accuracy. That is to say, the more actions a character or side has, the stronger they are. The only way to challenge high-level parties is to add more actions to the enemy side, not to mention that enemies scale in complexity alongside the players. More actions means more complexity, means more time spent each turn, so all this does is make combats take longer. It doesn't actually make them any more interesting. I don't know about you, but I'm really tired of getting excited when a combat starts and really bored less than halfway through. How do we fix this? Well, better question, how do we fix this without changing the core rules of D&D? Because the easiest fix is to just play a different system that's less combat-oriented, like the World of Darkness and its 3 and done turn order. But specific to D&D 5e, I have 2 solutions to make combat more engaging, and 2 solutions for making combat faster. They're all independent of one another, so feel free to mix and match. To make combat engaging, you need an engaging encounter. That is to say, don't just have a bullet sponge or 3 who sit there dealing half a character's health and damage every hit, but otherwise have nothing special about them. But how do you make an encounter special? You could load up the enemies with special abilities and actions, but not only does that slow down the game, like I mentioned before, that's just busy work. If each enemy has 4 attacks, 2 unique actions, and a passive and a special reaction, even with 1 enemy, you're probably going to forget about something. Not to mention how hard that is to scale. Further, if the enemy just has a laundry list of special abilities, that's not fun to play around. It seems simple, but players like seeing a fire enemy and splashing water on them for extra damage. Elemental typings are so common because they're so accessible. Instead of adding complexity to individual stat lines, consider adding complexity to the environment. And by that, I mean add a centerpiece to the battle map. This could be a fountain in the middle of the town square, blocking line of sight and providing cover. It could be an unstable crystal that fires out lightning to zap combatants indiscriminately. It could be as simple as a river that bisects the battle, where the enemies have ranged weapons and a vested interest in not getting stabbed. Then, add some kind of twist. The most obvious is to have enemies that engage in the environment in some capacity. Wow, would you look at that? I made a whole short exactly about that. You could have something go wrong, like the river flooding and sending creatures caught in it downstream. You could have something go right, like the crystal stabilizing enough to be controlled and directed by the party. The goal here is to present a notable change in the environment that the party can interact with, or otherwise an obstacle that they have to work around. Because then it's like a puzzle to solve, and with the twist part of the way through combat, the encounter stays fresh longer than fighting in an empty room. No added complexity on the side of the enemies needed. Another way to increase engagement, and this is highly dependent on your group already being invested in narratives, is to give the combats a narrative arc. Sure, most combats in a narrative game are going to be relevant to the plot. However, not all of them are. And further, just because it's plot relevant doesn't make it narratively engaging. You might need to fight the guards to reach the corrupt Duke, but that's no more narratively charged than fighting some bandits on the highway. They're obstacles keeping you from getting to the actually engaging bits. So make those obstacles narratively charged. Give each combat, or at least most combats, objectives other than just reduce the enemy side to 0 hit points. Add an NPC who the party needs to protect and who the enemies are risking their lives to bring harm to. Bonus points if the party actually likes them. Add a third faction that's fighting both the parties and their enemies at the same time. Can they be negotiated with? Something as simple as the enemy's morale failing and the survivors fleeing from the fight can instantly change how combat goes. The goal here is to introduce a miniature story that is entirely contained within the combat. For example, the party sneaks into the goblin's lair. However, they find all of the goblins dead and their treasure missing. That's when the party notices that none of the goblins have shadows, and everyone in the party has 2. Upon entering total darkness, shadows and a shadow demon attack. After combat, the shadow demon bargains for its life by offering the goblin's treasure, which is currently hidden and inaccessible via its shadow magic. This encounter could easily just be enter a room and fight some shadows and a shadow demon, but it's not. It has the added objective of solving the mystery of what happened and the added complication of the reward potentially being withheld from the party based on their actions. Further, the expectation of goblins but the reality of undead and a demon might mean the party's unprepared to deal with them. Suddenly, there's both mechanical and narrative tension. Doesn't matter if it takes an equal amount of time or even more time than it would have without this arc. It keeps the player's attention for longer. Those are ways to make combat more engaging, but they didn't really solve the time issue. So here's 2 more ideas that are less about making combats more engaging and more about just speeding up the mechanical process. And I'm skipping obvious solutions like adding a time limit to turns because that's no fun. That just stresses players out without much benefit. So you've heard of rolling for initiative in advance, I'm sure. Basically, players roll initiative before the start of the session or at the start of the session, and you record the numbers in advance. So once combat starts, the tracker is roughly lined up already, and you can just jump right in. But I'm going to say something controversial, like actually controversial, not just D&D combat slow. The DM should roll before an enemy's turn. What? Huh? You heard it right. If I'm running a dragon with its multi-attack and breath weapon, I should roll the attack rolls and damage dice for its breath weapon before starting its turn. Ideally, I'd roll this while a player is taking their turn and just write down the numbers for future reference. But maybe I just front load the rolling at the start of the dragon's turn before it actually does anything. Well, that doesn't seem fair, you say. But how? It's still die rolls just a bit before they'd actually be called for. The main avenue of abuse with this is that you can use it to blitz down certain characters, but that's just a jerk move. That's not a failing of the system, that's a failing of the DM. If anything, I feel like most DMs would use this as a safety net to ensure they don't blitz down anyone unintentionally. As much as folks love hyping up the player-DM rivalry, most DMs I've seen or spoken to really do want the party to succeed. And if you're wondering how this speeds things up, it's purely a matter of giving yourself more time to think. On a normal turn, a DM assesses the field, checks the stat block, makes a decision, narrates it, rolls, talks mechanics, then narrates the outcome. Rolling in advance shortens that down to assessment, decision-making, mechanics, narration. It's not a huge time save when just looking at the line items, but it streamlines the process for the DM. That means they're spending less time and energy in the moment figuring out what to do, which means they can make decisions faster and make the consequences of those decisions more engaging. Maybe that's not your style. Maybe you'd prefer to keep the mechanics of the game untouched. No worries, I got you. So let's talk about huddling. Group huddles are fun, but they have a tendency to be slow. Though on the other hand, it's the players engaging in the game. Though on the other hand, crosstalk isn't always productive. So the way to get around this is to have dedicated huddles and forbid them from speaking otherwise. Maybe not that severe, but try saying, hey y'all, 3 minutes, talk tactics as much as you want. But once that ends, you're not allowed to strategize with anyone else until the next battle round's huddle. Maybe you give the party 5 minutes, or maybe they get 3 huddles per combat instead of once per battle round. Fit it to your group. And I wouldn't even time how long the huddles are or penalize anyone who checks with the party before making a decision out of the huddle. Just encourage the mentality that combat is for fighting, while huddling is for strategizing. Obviously, if that seems dumb to you, then don't use it. But I just wanted to put it forward as a tool to use. The goal of this is to limit the amount of crosstalk that players have in favor of having dedicated periods of discussion, because then the only discussion that happens is gonna be worth it, because they know they have a limited amount of time. They get to ask what everyone's hit points are, reassess target priority, and strategize as much as they want. But outside of that huddle, the chaos of battle is too much, and they can't effectively talk tactics. A few words here or there, or asking a yes-no question is fine. But planning and tactics, which just so happens to be the crosstalk that takes the longest, particularly when folks feel like they can take as much time as they want to discuss it, those are reserved for the huddle. Something tells me folks aren't gonna like this one, but hey, it's the internet, no one likes anything. Just keep in mind, you shouldn't spring any of these on your party. Just like any other tool, the whole table should have a say in what gets implemented when. Some players might feel combat's just fine as is. Others might not care, because they might quite enjoy the break to go on their phone once in a session. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But don't feel like the way combat is now is the only way it will ever go. You can be the change your group needs. Just make sure they actually need it. I'm kind of curious to see what you've done in your own games to speed up combat. Please let me know. I love hearing what folks get up to in their own games. But in the meantime, I'm going to grind on some more videos to hit that sub goal, because I want to give back to you and pay you back what you've given to me. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Have fun.